2020 census. Hispanics are the largest demographic group at 40% and have been the primary driver for the state's population growth over the last decade. And as Senator West noted, our state of Texas is now minority majority, yet our representation grows less and less with every redistricting map that we draw and pass in this chamber. House Bill 4 redraws district lines to weaken the overall ability to elect the preferred candidates of choice. The overall number of districts where minority voters can effectively elect the preferred candidates is projected to shrink under House Bill 4. It reduces the number of congressional districts where a coalition of minorities hold the majorities from 9 to 4. From 9 to 4, it reduces the power and influence of minority voters in the state. Let us be clear, this map also splinters communities of interest. They've stood together for generations. It packs and cracks minority neighborhoods to shore up Republican control, breaking apart districts where minority voters have long elected candidates of their choice, and moving them to majority Anglo districts. In Corpus Christi, for example, House Bill 4 cracks minority communities, such as the historically black Hillcrest community, and moves it to a district that now includes part of South Austin. What do they have in common? Not much, if anything. Meanwhile, the rest of Corpus Christi is packed into a district that also includes Brownsville. A unified coastal community is broken apart, no longer connected to economic drivers, such as the Port of Corpus Christi and the Corpus Christi Army Depot. Even the Nueces County refineries are split into 2 different congressional districts. House Bill 4 also splits Del Mar College. The Port of Corpus Christi is also split from the Naval Air Station of Corpus Christi. In the Rio Grande Valley, cities like McAllen, Edinburgh, and Farr, places bound by shared culture, economic networks, and family ties are being fractured across multiple districts, diluting their voice in Congress, now working together as a community with long family histories. The cities of McAllen and Edinburgh, with a long history of working together under a single congressional district, are no longer together. This is not fair representation. This is deliberate division. In addition to that, City of Farr. The City of Farr is divided into 2. And the city has a school district, the Farr San Juan Alamo School District, which is divided in half. That is not a community of interest that's being done by House Bill 4. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the United States Constitution require maps to protect communities of interest and give every Texan an equal voice. Yet, this plan does not do that. It does the opposite. At its core, this plan violates the basic principles of fair representation in a true democracy and deepens mistrust in our democratic institutions. Voters should choose the representatives. Representatives should not manipulate maps to choose their voters. House Bill 4 entrenches power by weakening accountability, disfranchising communities of color, and defying the principles of fair and equal representation. We allow hyper-partisan gerrymandering to continue. We undermine the very foundation of our democracy. As President Abraham Lincoln said, Texas deserves maps that reflect its people, not maps that silence them. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Senator Menendez, you're now recognized to speak on the final passage.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members. I want to thank 3 of our most tenured colleagues in the Senate, Senator Zaffarini, Senator West, and Senator Hinojosa. You know, my father, if he was with us, he'd be 102 2 this year. So as you can imagine, he tried to impart a lot of wisdom, and I think we need to learn from the lessons of our past. Because if we don't, they'll come back to haunt us. And sometimes when we're sitting here working on legislation, it's just, and what's been said many times, it's just words on a piece of paper. The difference is that this map's going to affect people's lives. You know, there's a reason why so many people flock to this country and have for years. In the Declaration of Independence, when Thomas Jefferson wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. This bill, these maps reduce the consent of the governed. The people, especially those who live in these racially gerrymandered districts. In these founding documents, Americans were promised a better and more just future. I feel that we have strayed very far. This letter that I hold in my hand right here is the letter that many have referred to, dated July the 7th. At the very top, it says U.S. Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, Office of the Attorney General. Addressed to Greg Abbott, Office of the Governor, and Ken Paxton. The part I'm going to read to you is just where it says, as stated below, congressional districts Texas 9, 18, 29, and 33 currently constitute unconstitutional coalition districts, and we urge the state of Texas to rectify these race-based considerations from these specific districts. Race-based. So the Department of Justice writes this letter to the governor on July the 7th. On July the 9th, Governor Abbott issues a proclamation where it says, legislation that provides a revised congressional redistricting plan in light of constitutional concerns raised by the U.S. Department of Justice. What constitutional concerns? The ones that say that these coalition districts are race-based. I find it difficult to understand how we can be listening to our colleague talk about how race was not taken into consideration when the Department of Justice asked specifically to rectify the race-based considerations. And then we ask ourselves sometimes as public servants, why do people not vote? Why is the vote turnout so low? What's happening? Because when they see gerrymandered maps like this that take someone living in Travis County and put them in a district with someone in Ector County 375 miles away, they're like, what is fair, compact about this? When they hear that 9 minority districts are going to go to 4, when 90% of the growth in the last decennial census was made up of minorities. 90%. Yesterday, we heard many of our colleagues in the House talk about specifically how they're going to discriminate and hurt our communities. Representative Anchia said the Latino community by any standard is already underrepresented in this state. We represent 40% of the population, responsible 50% of the growth, and yet these maps have to be intentional to have us enjoy even less representation under this map if you apply the numbers this map furnished. It just doesn't make sense. If you apply math to that percentage, 4 to 5 districts out of 48 comes out to 10.5%, 13%, even though Latinos represented 50% of the growth. In Tarrant County, where 70% of the population is Latino, this map dismantles their only chance at a congressional representative. In Dallas County, millions of Latinos have waited over a decade to have an opportunity to elect a Dallas County neighbor of their choice. This map denies that opportunity. Working class families are paired with faraway suburbs that have nothing in common. In my hometown in San Antonio, a performing 60% plus Latino congressional seat disappears, gone, with no explanation. This map is not democratic or representative. It is deliberately, intentionally a racially gerrymandered map. Senator Zaffirini covered a lot of the stats that were covered by the next representative, and I'm not going to be repetitive. But I think that this is something that does need to be repeated. Under this map, under the map that's being proposed for us to vote on right now, white Texans will receive 1 member of Congress for every 445,000 residents. But if you're Hispanic, it's going to take 1.5 million residents, as Senator Zaffirini said earlier, to get the same representation, 1 congressperson. But if you're black, it's going to take 2 million African Americans. In this proposal, an Hispanic, as has been said, has 1/3 of the political value of a white Texan and a black 1/5. Representative Ana Hernandez said Latino communities in this map have been split apart. In Congressional District 29, which has stood as a performing Latino majority district, the map dismantles the district and Hispanic citizen voting age population is reduced by 20%. Members, this process in this map, no matter what has been said, the outcome, the net effect, is intentional discrimination. I understand the author of the bill says it doesn't violate the Voting Rights Act, that the act that prohibits racial discrimination, all while claiming these maps were drawn race blind. But how? How can we believe that to be the case when Senator King has told us over and over again that he did not draw the maps, that he did not run the test, that these maps were given to him? Today we heard that Senator King and Adam Kincaid, who was possibly one of the map makers, had something to do with the map making, does map making for the Republican Party, that they've spoken 3 times. But Senator King said, don't tell me anything about maps. Don't talk to me about maps, is what I heard when they saw each other at the ALEC convention. Well, but Senator, how did you know he was drawing maps? Folks, I'm going to close with this. I've told y'all, I've had great conversations with many of you offline where we've been able to talk about our background, where we come from, who makes us, what it makes us who we are. And y'all know, both my parents immigrated to this country with nothing. Father with a 4th grade education, my mom with a nursing degree at the age of 18, just with a strong will, strong backs, and a desire to work hard. And they raised us saying, work hard, stay determined, play by the rules. And in this country, people respect the rules and you'll be able to do anything. These maps, they're going to dilute the voting strength, the representation for communities of colors. These maps are going to make it more difficult for communities of colors to progress. These maps are discriminatory based on the impacts on racial minorities. And as we heard earlier from our colleague, Senator Gutierrez, they split Native American tribes. These maps are unconstitutional and illegal. Mr. Chairman, you said yourself today that the data that needed to be used to draw the only data was decennial census data. I repeat, in the last redistricting, in the last census cycle, that gave us this redistricting 2021 cycle, with 90% growth being minority, we did not gain one additional Hispanic opportunity seat. In this map, yet again, we do not gain another seat. And just recently, as the Supreme Court is getting ready to debate and entertain some of the issues that are occurring, here we go. There's case law that holds that a good faith presumption applies to congressional maps when they are originally drawn by the Texas legislature after a decennial census. In a mid-decade redistricting such as this, the good faith presumption may not apply because the Texas legislature redrew majority-minority districts after it was made aware that the law regarding majority-minority districts is unsettled, and the constitutionality of the majority-minority districts is being currently considered by the U.S. Supreme Court in Louisiana versus Calais. The legislature will be acting in bad faith, dismantling existing majority-minority districts and creating new ones, knowing the constitutionality of those districts has yet to be decided by the Supreme Court. Members, as I read earlier in our Declaration of Independence, this country was meant to derive its just powers from the consent of the governed. Our democracy has been strong for a long time, but I worry about the future. This has gone too far. Why? Because it's the right of the people to govern it. I am asking everyone to watch that's watching, please do not give up, get involved, even though the odds are going to be potentially actively stacked against you. You have to show up. You have to show up every time. You have to vote because our government is representative of our communities. Today, just like our country, the Texas Senate, I feel like with these maps that talk about fairness, legality, compactness, yet you have Travis County sliced and diced like a pizza, Tarrant and Dallas and Harris. Harris, I think I counted 9 congressional districts in one county. 9. Bits and pieces, just grabbing the people they wanted for certain districts. That's not compact. That's not constitutional. It's not legal. You know, there was a senator long before I ever even thought about politics, long before I even was here, who used this desk, who fought segregationist laws, who fought anything he felt was against fair and equal representation for his communities. And that senator went on to be a U.S. congressman. And in San Antonio, Congressman Henry B. Gonzalez, whose portrait is hanging back there, he used this desk. We have got to take a real accounting of ourselves. Because, folks, What do we gain? If your party picks up 5 seats here, what do you gain? But if you make the people of Texas lose faith in their government, what do you really gain? I implore you to vote no against this flawed map. Thank you, members and Mr. President.
Senator Miles, to speak on final passage.
I speak against the bill, Mr. President. You know, by now, I would think that all of you in this chamber know that I don't say much. But when I do speak, I mean what I say, and I say what I mean. From the moment I was appointed to this committee, Chairman King, I've been very clear, and I've made it very clear to all of you that I was going to expose this process for what it truly is. You know, we talk about decorum in this chamber, but there is no decorum to be had when you're being oppressed and the voices of your community, black and brown communities, are being suppressed. I've served in this legislature since 2007, elected by my peers in my community. I'm a senator, and I enjoy being a senator. But I will always be a black man first. In every session, I come to this floor and I tell you about these policies, from CRT to DEI to now this election bill and this redistricting bill. How much harm it will cause. And every time I hear from my Republican colleagues in this chamber, they tell me I'm wrong about it. They tell me I'm wrong. And every morning I wake up to a life, every morning, of pain for my people. If it's from CRT to DEI to the election process. So let me be clear. This map from HB to SB and back to committee substitute is just plain racist. This map is disrespectful, it is deplorable, it is discriminatory. And the actions of ramming it through the process is devious, damaging, and downright despicable. The Republican leadership followed through with the president's plan, aided by the Department of Justice, putting out a hit list for congressional seats in the black and brown communities of Texas. This plan seeks to discriminate against people of color and steal congressional seats. And yes, I mean steal. When you take what doesn't belong to you, it's called stealing. Fact, these congressional seats do not belong to any elected official, any one party, or any president. They belong to the people. The people. This is about citizens in this state of a district having the ability to elect a candidate of their choice, From the beginning of this process of mid-district and mid-decade redistricting has been a complete sham, as I said earlier, and a farce. You know, some of you may know and some of you may not care, but August 6th was the 60th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act in Texas, in this country. And Texas has been found guilty of violating the Voters' Rights Act every decade since enacted, every doggone decade for the last 2 decades. As I said before, and I mean this, and I want y'all to hear this, you cannot be complicit in racist actions and get mad when someone calls you a racist. You can no longer hide the racism of your party. Once more, we face a map that does not reflect the truth of Texas, but instead manipulates and whitewashes it. They call it redistricting, but let's be clear, it's redistricting. When you imbalance the voting of the guarantee one result, that's not democracy, that's rigging. And when you rig, the people's choice is taken away. Texas is the home of the largest black population in the United States. That should mean something and how these maps are drawn. But instead of recognizing that, that's the reality, this map seeks to bury it. It takes the voices of black Texans, splits them up, dilutes them, packs them, cracks them, and erodes black voices in this state. Let's dig a little deeper and a little closer to home. Houston's black population accounts for 35% of the state's overall black population. And instead of recognizing that and creating an additional opportunity, you pack Congressional District 18, disintegrate the black vote in Congressional District 9, move them to 18, and have the audacity to act as if you've done us a favor. The population has grown, but you've gone backwards with this map. Decreasing black opportunity seats from 2 to 1 in Houston and across the state are not gifts. Come on, y'all, we can count. We all know basic math. Packing Congressional District 18 is not representation. Destroying 9 is not representation. It is suppression. And make no mistake, suppression is rigged districting. In committee, over and over and over again, the chair reiterated, the map is laid out. Maps he admits he did not draw, that they were drawn race blind. And the bottom line to that is, it's impossible. It lacks knowledge. Everyone in this chamber knows that black folks in Texas overwhelmingly vote Democratic. That's not a secret to anyone. So when you set out to create more Republican seats, what are you really doing? It's dismantling the ability of black Texans to elect candidates who truly represent their community interests. That's common sense. Not to mention, the maps were drawn by a national Republican redistricting committee. But let me make it clear, there can be no fairness for Hispanic Texans, if there's no fairness for black Texans, if there's no fairness for any of us, there can be no fairness for any voter in this state. But when you silence one community, you weaken democracy for all of us. And when you weaken democracy, you take the congressional seats away from people they belong to and hand them over as property. This map strips it all away. That's what this map does. It is a slap in the face of black voters. It's a slap in the face of Hispanic voters and every voter who calls Texas home. And if Texas is truly for one for all, then voting must matter for all people. In Texas, we have witnessed to the unrelenting massive assault on Voting Rights Act, diminishing the political voices of black and browns and marginalizing people unlike anywhere else since the Jim Crow era. This mid-districting, or this rigged districting, is just a tactic and another assault. You know, I was in a barbershop the other day when I got a chance to go home, Royce. This old 70, maybe 80-year-old black man came in, and he started talking about redistricting to me and this whole situation. And he described it like this. It's Jim Crow in a new Cadillac. The people of Texas have spoken through testimony, through protests, through their presence at this Capitol. Yet leadership turned a deaf ear, acting as if those voices do not matter. I once heard the four most powerful words in democracy: the people have spoken. But it's clear the leadership of this state and this nation don't want to hear the black and brown folks speak. And it's clear that the leadership in the state is not listening when 98% of the people who testified, who chimed in on this map, on this redistricting, spoke against it. 98%. 2% was in favor of this map. 2%. Let me remind you, black voices matter, brown voices matter. Every voice in this state matters. And when you deny those voices, you're not redistricting. Once again, you're redistricting. You know, let's make a note. Whenever an issue of equality and rights, such as this map, comes up in Republicans, they often try to justify their actions by saying, well, the Democratic Party was a party of oppression, and the Republican Party freed the slaves. Okay, thank you. But that's not an excuse. You cannot justify the unjustifiable. The Republican Party has become the party of oppression, and you are now the party of disenfranchising. Voters drawing racist maps by adopting voter suppression laws. What matters is the moment. What matters is now. What matters is what are you going to do now? Republicans in this chamber and the House have the numbers. We understand that. We as Democrats understand we're outnumbered. So you have the ability to do whatever you want. But I ask this, just because you can do something, does it mean you should do something? Lastly, if you allow me, let me speak to everyone in the sound of my voice, watching from the gallery or streaming online. This redistricting is just another evil tactic to keep us from exercising our constitutional right of voting. Yes, the Republicans have stacked the deck, and this abomination is going to pass, but do not give up. Trump and the Republicans want us to be discouraged and dismayed. They want to give you a reason to stay at home on election day, but please don't. This is my call to arms. Your vote is your weapon. So show them that we can fight and fight back. Show them that we can get down. Show them that their voices in black and brown marginalized communities cannot be silenced. Vote in spite of. Vote because of. Vote because of or in spite of this evil map. Don't give them what they want. Spread the truth. Prepare for 2026 and beyond. Be the hurdle in their way. Take yourself and your neighbor, your friend, and get to the ballot box. We need to mobilize, prepare for the battle. Show Trump and the Republicans how here in Texas, we really get down. Show them who you are, and more importantly, show them whose you are. This is redistricting. Coined, rigged districting. We must keep our faith, keep our fight.
Senator Johnson, to speak on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this is, by any measure, an extraordinary step, a mid-decennial redistricting in a special session. The redistricting process typically takes a couple of years. This one's happening in a matter of days, maybe weeks. And it happened with the speed of the yank on a dog's leash. It's not dignified, it's not just, it's not legal. We've heard the explanation that this really isn't about race, This is just about Republican political performance. And we've heard that one before. We heard that, something like that back in 2003. Tom DeLay led the push to redraw maps just 2 years into the decennial cycle. He succeeded. It was a disaster. He was also convicted in the Abramoff scandal a few months later, so I don't know if that portends well for this outcome here. But it certainly speaks to the character of such an act. I think this is a gross misstep for many reasons. It looks like you're going to get your 5 seats, but what really is the purpose underlying all this? I don't think it is just like Tom DeLay's, we want more power, we have the numbers, we can get it. That happens in Texas, in Illinois, California, New York, Oklahoma. It happens all over the country every 10 years in an orderly process that most of us don't think is a very good process. I think maybe privately we might all be relieved if the federal government and the state governments would join together and ban mid-decennial redistricting by statute or by constitution or by both, and enact independent redistricting commissions. Now, I've heard valid concerns that independent redistricting commissions in the end aren't all that independent in practice. And there's probably something to that. It's pretty difficult to cleanse a human being of all partisan leanings whatsoever, particularly if you're in a state that has a bent one way or another. But here's one thing for sure that wouldn't be happening if we had independent redistricting commissions. We wouldn't be doing it. We'd be figuring out what we're going to do with THC or flooding or property tax or the other things that we probably ought to be doing during a regular session instead of during a special session, so we could use the interim for the less partisan, less flashbulby process of figuring out what kind of policy we ought to pursue when we get here for our 140-day sprints. But that's not where we are right now. And so I ask you, as you embark on this process, which my colleagues have very, very articulately condemned with objective information, you're doing this at what cost? At what cost to public faith in our institutions, in our elections? What cost to faith of the public in not just our elections, but in their participation in the elections, in the outcome of the elections? I think you're undermining our faith in democracy. You're setting off a national gerrymandering. I learned how to pronounce that correctly. Is the legislator from Massachusetts who gave rise to the word gerrymandering, which is how we say it. His name was Gary. So gerrymandering, a nationwide gerrymandering war is now in effect because of us, right? Nobody else was doing this before. And in fact, I'm not going to say us. I'm going to say y'all as the majority. That's a consequence of this. But also think about the consequences to this institution. I talked about this last round. It's an act of compliance. It's passive. It waives any even pretense of that Texas independence of which we're all so proud. It was just a quick suggestion from the president that went to the governor that went to here, and serving up 5 seats in a gerrymandering war and undermining faith in democratic elections. And there's one other piece of damage to this institution and one other piece of undermining faith, and that is participation in the processes that happen in this building. And I'm talking specifically about hearings. Senator Miles brought up the hearings. 98% of people testified against it, 2% in favor. But after 6, 7, 8 hours of grueling questions and answers, Senator King demonstrated impressive stamina. What I didn't hear anywhere in there was any consideration for anything anyone said in hearing. What was the point? Are we dressing this up to try to make it look legitimate? There was no amount of hours of hearings. There were no number of hearings in any number of places geographically dispersed across the state or done virtually that could have legitimized what we're doing here. And my notes just disappeared. So I'll move on to the next part. Those are the damages. That's the cost. And the third thing I want to take up is the damage to the law or the challenge to the law that we all now face. No one in here is a Voting Rights Act expert, but we all have artificial intelligence to consult and able staffs, and we all have a pretty good grasp that the Voting Rights Act looks not only at the intent to discriminate, which would certainly be avoided if a map is drawn without regard to racial data, but also the Voting Rights Act looks at discriminatory effect, intended or not, including historically throughout the district courts in the country, coalition districts where one or more minority groups is politically cohesive and combined in a district, whether intentionally when the district was drawn, or by happenstance. But at the moment that we're standing in, there are districts, 5 of them now targeted, where minority groups, 2 or more, combine in a politically cohesive way to be able to choose the people they wish to put in office. And if they're split up, they will no longer have that ability, the result of which is lower representation by greater proportions of people, which doesn't seem consistent with the democratic ideal. In fact, it's not. It's so flagrantly in contravention of everything the Voting Rights Act has stood for since its enactment that you'd think it was a laydown. Your maps are dead. Now, I hope that is the case. But my feeling and my suspicion is that the plan here by the map drawers in Washington, D.C., and the team of lawyers that thought this stuff up, that assure all of you that these maps comply with the Voting Rights Act, that what they really mean is that these maps comply with what we think the courts might later hold about the Voting Rights Act. That the Fifth Circuit's aberrant view, effectively gutting the Voting Rights Act, will become the view of the United States Supreme Court. I hope not. I hope not. And it makes me sad that we would even attempt to avail of that in the middle of a decade. But here we are. And we will see how the courts come down on this. And I have hope that they will not, that they, the Supreme Court, will not decide that these maps are okay under some new, less helpful version of the Voting Rights Act. And these maps will go away. I don't know when. I don't know if it's going to be 1 year or 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. I mean, the judicial recourse isn't all that great either, so I kind of wish we would do things right in the first instance. But we're going to see this play out in the courts. And maybe in response to all of this, in response to the gerrymandering war we've set off around the nation, we will see some federal action banning mid-decennial redistricting. We will see state action and federal action requiring independent redistricting commissions. And maybe that comes as a result of the 26 election wave, when the electorate rises up and says, this is too much. Thank you.
Senator Blanco, speak on final passage.
To speak in opposition to the bill. Thank you, Mr. President, members. When our founding fathers met in Philadelphia in 1787, they sought to design a government that would endure. And it has done just that. It has endured. Our government, our country, our form of government, it's that shining light, that shining city on a hill. It's a testament to the rest of the world that America is a beacon of freedom, that it represents prosperity, but importantly, democratic ideals. And our founders understood that those constitutional principles and the very legitimacy of our government depended on fair representation of the people. James Madison wrote in Federalist number 52 that the definition of the right of suffrage is very justly regarded as a fundamental article of Republican government. Meaning representation was not a detail, but rather it was a cornerstone. And to preserve that cornerstone, the framers created a system grounded in regularity and in fairness, in regularity and in fairness. They required a census every 10 years so that districts would be adjusted to reflect actual population growth and population shifts. And as Madison further explained in Federalist 54, apportionment must be based on the aggregate number of inhabitants, so that representation remained faithful to the people themselves. And that's why our founders enshrined this idea of tying redistricting to the decennial census. Article 1, Section 2 of the United States Constitution mandates that an apportionment of representatives among the states must be carried out every 10 years. Members, apportionment is the original legal purpose of the decennial census, as intended by our nation's founders. It ensures that the process is not arbitrary, not political, but anchored in objective data, measured at regular intervals. It reflects growth, not advantage. It reflects representation, not power. And that is why this map and this redistricting bill gives me such concern. Mid-decade redistricting, absent a court order, departs from that constitutional design. It untethers the process from population, and instead, it ties it to political expedience. It risks turning a solemn duty into an instrument of political advantage. And some may argue that, there's no law prohibiting mid-decade redistricting. But members, just because there's no law that doesn't prohibit it, it just doesn't make it right to do it. And while the framers of our Constitution, they did not envision maps being drawn whenever it suited those in power. They actually intended apportionment to follow the census, so that representation would follow the people, not politics. That was a directive that they enshrined in our Constitution. So why are we ignoring that? Why is this legislature not heeding the warning of our founding fathers? Why is Texas bending the knee? Our founders, including Thomas Jefferson, understood the dangers of unchecked power. Jefferson reminded us that an elective despotism was not the government that we fought for. He distrusted any concentration of authority that ignored the voice of the people. And if redistricting can be rewritten at will, well, then we invite the possibility of maps being drawn every election cycle. The very despotism that Jefferson warned us against. And if the rules of representation can be written whenever politically convenient, then stability is lost. Fairness abandoned. And the people's faith in democracy itself is shaken. We must ask ourselves, will Texas continue to believe in the equality of their ballot when the foundation of equal representation will be easily bent? Will they still trust the principle of one person, one vote if that principle is subjected to manipulation at every turn? You know, as a veteran, I swore an oath in uniform to defend the Constitution. Many of us in this body wore that uniform. And many of us as elected officials swore to defend the Constitution. A Constitution that guarantees equal protection, a Constitution that guarantees equal voice, a Constitution that provides for equal representation of every citizen. And carving out maps for partisan advantage, well, that just undermines that guarantee. Members, the Constitution is not a suggestion. It's the foundation of our democracy. And it's our solemn duty to uphold it. You know, history is not only going to record the votes that we take today, it's also going to record whether we honored the vision of those who entrusted us with this responsibility more than 2 centuries ago. For these reasons, and to honor our Constitution, to honor our democracy, and to honor our founding fathers, I'll be voting no on House Bill 4. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Gutierrez, you're recognized to speak on the bill.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Rise at this moment. I wasn't intending to speak. I was asked by my colleagues if I was going to speak, and I really wasn't intending to speak very much because I thought we'd had our moment earlier and we kind of get everything off our chest. But I thought to myself, what do we do if we end up in the courthouse? What do people that have been disenfranchised have to do and show if we get to the courthouse? How do we prove that case? And I was listening to my colleague, Senator Miles and Senator West and Senator Menendez, Senator Blanco, and so many others. I sat up in my office, had some dinner, a real quick bite of dinner, and I got inspired by their words. I thought to myself, well, what's this about? I mean, how do we prove this case? What's that binder look like? We talked about it earlier. What's that trial notebook look like? We have to show that the proponents of these maps Senator King and others, used racial bias in the makeup of these maps. That's really what this is about. That's what all this questioning has been about all day long. The questioning in the House of Representatives was just yesterday. Was it yesterday? Day before? To show that there has been racial bias in the making of the map. So I figured, well, let's start with day one. We have a proclamation in the first session from the governor, and he goes off and he cites the Department of Justice letter that says that there was reverse gerrymandering, if you will, race-based considerations from the creation of certain coalition districts in 21. Even though the Attorney General said that there was no race considerations of any sort, even though everybody in this room, every Republican in this room voted for those maps, even though Senator King himself suggested that he was going to vote for those maps because he felt that they were fair, not racially drawn, and within the Voting Rights Act. And so here we are, all of a sudden, with new maps, and now these maps, supposedly, are not racially drawn in any way. The proponent of this bill would have us suggest that he lives in a world of blissful ignorance. Says, I don't know. I didn't look at race data. I relied on my lawyers. I didn't see their analysis. I didn't read their analysis. Even though he got an opinion from them that none of us have seen. Even though he acknowledges that they likely did ecological inference analysis and they likely did racial polarized voting analysis. They didn't give him a report. He didn't ask for a report. It's real simple to say, well, I didn't use race analysis. I didn't use race data into consideration. Other people did. Other people did. He said, I didn't, over and over again, we've heard for weeks, I don't know who the map makers are. Never met the map makers. We have that on audio tape over and over. Never met the map makers. Don't know who they are. Don't know who the map drawers are. And this might seem like an attack on Senator King, and I don't mean it to be. But the fact is, we've got to find out who the racists are. Now, it's not Senator King. It's the map makers, the people he's never met. Those are the ones that use the race data to pack and crack these districts. I'd love to know who they are. But we find out today that in actuality, he had met one of them. Even though he said over and over again he didn't know, he had not met with him. We find out today that Adam Kincaid is his friend for many years. Talked to him 2 months ago over the phone. Met him at the ALEC Republican Conference. Last call was this Monday. He called him to tell him, hey, we're making changes to the map. Senator King would have us believe that, okay, I got to go. That was the end of that call. Then he says that, ask for someone's number. How long was that call? I imagine we'll find out. Imagine that lawsuit. We'll uncover phone records and data. They'll show us how long that call was. We'll see if there's any text there. Somehow, miraculously, districts, almost 7 of them, end up cracked back down to the margins, where minorities are just over a 50% threshold. But there was no race data in the offing, according to Senator King. According to Senator King, there's no race data in the offing. So we have the DOJ's letter that shows that race was a consideration. We have the governor's proclamation that cites the DOJ's letter. We come now to the blissful ignorance that we've heard all day long today. It's the best way to try this case, to not know, to not say. That's what he's told us. It would appear to me that our friend is a great lawyer, a great witness. But it is clear to me also that 444 precincts were broken down to the block level. 444 precincts were divided down to the block level. And the only way, and when you do that, the only data that you have that gives you the race data that you're looking for is census data. Someone looked at the census data to break down 444 precincts. And we look at some of the principles of the Voting Rights Act as we try to keep precincts whole. And we've all known that. We've been over this, some of us for 2 and 3 times over the last 10, 15 years. We've dealt with this. But in this map, 444 precincts were broken down at the block level. And so, I know many of you would like to remain in blissful ignorance. I think that the people of the state of Texas deserve a little bit more transparency than blissful ignorance. I think that the people of the state of Texas deserve real honesty, real answers. And as I said at the very beginning of this thing, they deserve that our time not be wasted on this crap. That they deserve that the real issues of the state of Texas be addressed, rather than some political witch hunt for Donald Trump and his cronies. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Cook, you're recognized to speak on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. I rise tonight to speak in opposition of this bill and of the entire process. Earlier today, we heard what sounded like just a joke or a quip about adding the word expeditious to the fruits of the Spirit. And I just want to say how disrespectful it is to my constituents, to all of our constituents, when we joke around about how we need to be more expeditious about redrawing all of the congressional lines in the middle of a decade with obvious, serious consequences for Black and brown voters. This process should not be done quickly. It should not be done behind closed doors. It should be done very publicly and with as much warning as a decennial census gives us. There were also comments about when one is sponsoring a House bill, that one does not do one's research or homework or carry that bill as though it's somebody else's baby, which we all know that it is. And so I just want my constituents and the people in this chamber to know that when I pick up a House bill, I do my homework, and I do learn everything that I possibly can about it, and I assure the person for whom I'm carrying it that I am going to care for it the way that I think that they would. I think that's how you get good policy. The concept of one person and one vote is a deeply empathetic concept that centers on human dignity. I truly believe that each one of us is actually a child of God, and that how people feel matters to me. Every single person in this state is just as much a human being as I am, and that's why they deserve to be a part of the processes that shape the change around them. To disrespect that is to disrespect the concept of humanity entirely. And I just want to say how painful it is to watch many of the members in this chamber be completely silent throughout this entire process. But sometimes when there's moments off the mic, there's a little bit of honesty about how broken this is. how unnecessary it is, how really no Texans are asking for this. Maybe even a joke about how the map in Houston now looks like a hurricane because that's the only way to squeeze out more Republicans. That is a hurtful statement to me and to so many people in my district, especially the Black and brown voters. Throughout the process of SB4 and HB4 moving through this legislature, the people's voices have been ignored. There were no Senate statewide regional hearings, unlike those held for every redistricting process in all of Texas history. Texas House was no better, with a meager 3 field hearings, and at the Houston one, almost 1,000 people showed up. But thanks to confusion and disorganization, my opinion, disrespect, and a lack of access for folks who use sign language, hundreds never got the chance to speak. Afterward, I joined my House colleagues to hear the people's testimony for 2 hours at Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church. Since their voices were not a part of the official record, I would like to take this moment to enter some of their words into the record tonight. Savant Moore, a proud CD18 voter, said, "This district isn't just lines on a map, it's a legacy. Where Barbara Jordan made history, where Mickey Leland marched for the poor, and where Sheila Jackson Lee defended those that no one else would. So when you propose a redraw of CD18, you're not just moving boundaries, you're moving the soul of our community. We didn't come here asking for change, we asked to protect what generations of people built." Another person, Debbie White, said, "Gerrymandering denies communities their rightful voice in Congress. It fractures neighborhoods like the 3rd Ward, Acres Homes, and 5th Ward, communities that deserve fair representation. Redistricting should reflect population growth and the diversity of our state, not suppress them." Coretta Brown said, "Will you allow yourself to become a cheater of democracy? Will you sit silent while standing on the shoulders of giants like Barbara Jordan, Mickey Leland, Thurgood Marshall, and Sheila Jackson Lee? We've seen this before. After Reconstruction, Black representation was violently, and I mean violently, stripped away. Communities lost rights and progress for nearly a century until the civil rights movement reclaimed them through the struggle and sacrifice. If you allow this redistricting to happen, you are choosing to disregard that legacy." Gretchen Brown said, "I grew up in both the 18th and 9th districts. Make no mistake, these districts didn't just raise me. They grounded my values, my vision, and most of all, my ability to fight." 77021, 77033, 77048. If you're familiar, that's up and down MLK Boulevard, but also most of Houston's South Side and also Missouri City. Representation matters. It really does, which is why I called out those zip codes and parts of town. These parts of town are often overlooked. Last on the list, redistricting. It shouldn't erase the neighborhoods that built us, that built me. It should reflect our voices, protect our legacy, and ensure the next generation sees leadership that feels local, lived, and truly theirs. And yet, today, this body passed a map that tells my constituents their voices are expendable. The changes we're witnessing are fundamentally altering the makeup of congressional districts that have historically provided representation for communities of color in Houston. When communities that have worked together for decades, shared schools, churches, and struggles are suddenly divided, you do silence their voice. You weaken their ability to advocate effectively for healthcare, infrastructure, housing, and every single basic need. You destroy legacies, relationships that have spanned generations, and collective memories that teach the next generation. These maps are racist, and they are devastating. Plain and simple. It's one thing to do this every 10 years, and it's another to fly in the face of every constitutional rule and do it mid-cycle. It's arrogant, and the greed is insurmountable. I would like to close with a quote from the Barbara Jordan, whose picture, of course, hangs on the wall. who represented both Senate District 11 and Congressional District 18 and many of the communities that I get to represent and serve today. It was the question to be answered in 1976 when Barbara Jordan gave this address, and it is still the question to be answered today. Let us heed the voice of the people and recognize their common sense. If we do not, we not only blaspheme our political heritage, we also ignore the common ties that bind Americans. Many fear the future's uncertainty, and are distrustful of their leaders, and believe that their voices are not heard. They seek only to satisfy their private dreams. They ignore the common interests, the common good. This is the great danger that America faces, that we will cease to be one nation and dissolve into a collection of interest groups and individuals, each seeking to fulfill private dreams, each seeking to satisfy private wants. If this occurs, who then will speak for America? Who will speak for the common good? This is the question to be answered. Today, we have seen the common good be cast aside.
Senator Eckhart, you're recognized to speak on the bill.
Thanks so much. We've talked a lot about Barbara Jordan in this chamber. And what a wonderful thing that we've talked a lot about Barbara Jordan. I choose to sit right next to her portrait because on days where I feel like there's just no chance of the minority getting heard in this chamber, no chance of having a chairmanship, no chance of being placed on a committee where we have actual expertise, no chance of actually participating in the formation of policy in this chamber, I look over at her and go, geez Louise, put on your big girl panties. Barbara had it way worse. Keep going, right? It's so awesome to be able to glance to the right and know that we can keep going, that we can become a more perfect union. So I want to take you back in time to when Barbara was in this chamber and when redistricting was happening in the early 70s. And I'm going to take you straight to a book that talks about it. It actually has my father's name on it. In 1970 reapportionment, Texas had gained 1 congressional seat, and much as Eckhart worked to draw a seat for himself in 1965, now his state Senate allies, Charlie Wilson, Don Kennard, Oscar Mauzey, Babe Schwartz, and Barbara Jordan wanted that 1 new seat. Jordan was close to Lieutenant Governor Ben Barnes, and he supported her effort to get that new seat. White guy supporting a black woman to get that new seat. Eckhart went to Barnes's office to discuss the redistricting dynamics, and Barnes made sure that all the incumbents, including Eckhart, had districts they could continue to win. It was the incumbent protection era of gerrymandering. Yet he had to be careful. Eckhart had supported Jordan and loved the idea of her coming to Congress, but he had to give up black precincts in his district to a new district for her to win. Both he and Jordan were able to get what they needed. He kept his workshop district, and she got many, though not all, of the minority communities in her district. At the same time he got caught up in a rift among black allies, Barnes and most of the senators had come to like and trust Jordan. She worked well with them, and they considered her an insider. But Curtis Graves, who was definitely not an insider, wanted Jordan's state Senate seat. Barnes and senators were alarmed at the possibility and decided to block him. Jordan went to Lauro Cruz, who was on the redistricting conference committee, and asked where Graves's house was on the map. Jordan took out a magic marker and drew a line around his house into the district that extended into River Oaks, the wealthy white area of town, and the map was passed. Graves was furious. Knowing that he could not win, indeed the seat did go to a white person, he instead filed to run for Congress, and Jordan and Graves battled each other in the primary, with Jordan winning the nomination. Eckhart had to stay neutral. The reason why I read this, and it may sound familiar to you, this kind of horse trading, the politics of redistricting, that absolutely has been around since the beginning of our republic. Absolutely. But what you hear, the difference here, is that it was transparent. Graves knew that Barbara Jordan had drawn a circle around his house. Ben Barnes knew who all was vying for those seats, and all the people who were vying for those seats knew each other were vying for those seats. There was no law firm that drew the districts behind closed doors and didn't share any of the actual analysis. There was no attorney-client privilege that kept them from knowing what was going on. That didn't happen, members. That didn't happen until the later 1970s and into the 1980s. And it didn't go on steroids until recently. This kind of cloak and dagger secrecy, this pretending that we don't know, is new. And it's dangerous. We must show integrity and leadership. We must be honest with each other and with our constituencies about how, when, and why we are reapportioning. When we do it every 10 years, but most especially when we do it in an unusual mid-decade redistricting effort. This idea of doing redistricting behind closed doors with lawyers under attorney-client privilege in the middle of the decade is very new. So if somebody tells you everybody does it, this is how it's always been done, look at history. We've heard a lot about one person, one vote. And a lot of people, I think, assume that that goes all the way back to the beginning of the Republic. It doesn't. One person, one vote is a concept that was derived by case law in 1965 in connection with the Voting Rights Act. Before that, politicians were almost entirely white and almost entirely male. And while the Congress was apportioned by population, state legislatures could draw congressional districts of any population to satisfy their political benefit. And that's how the U.S. House of Representatives remained almost entirely white and almost entirely male. The one person, one vote concept and the Voting Rights Act changed that and ushered in an era where we started to become a more perfect union, reflective, having representatives that were reflective of the actual population of the United States. So, in closing, by bringing redistricting into mid-decade, just in time for a midterm, and doing it with a law firm under attorney-client privilege and pretending that you don't have access to the information that they used, is going to take us backward. We will ignite a redistricting civil war across the United States, where the minority in each state will be disenfranchised by a hyper-politicized and secret process. So for those who are listening who think that this is just Democrats bellyaching, in another state, it will be the Republicans bellyaching. Look at what the Republican Party chair in California is saying about the threatened redistricting there. It sounds really similar to what we're saying here. So please think about what we're doing here. We are going backward. We are going pre-Civil Rights Act. We are going pre-one person, one vote. That is what's happening here. We are going back in time. And it's not better back there. Read the history. It's not better back there.
Senator Hinojosa from Nueces.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I rise in support of House Bill 4. Members, these maps, which actually increase the number of majority-minority voting districts, have one goal: to make sure the people of Texas have their values represented in Washington. Yet every time minorities shift politically, we hear the same tired excuse: racist this, racist that. It's all we've heard all day long. Quite frankly, I'm done listening to it. It's time to put an end to the outdated belief that you can predict political outcomes based on the color of someone's skin. That idea is wrong morally and factually, and I stand here as living proof. You see, in 2022, my district, Senate District 27, seated in the Rio Grande Valley, was drawn to favor the other party by at least 4 percentage points. But I didn't lose by 4 percentage points. I lost by less than 1/3 of 1%. But where was the wailing and gnashing of the teeth like we hear today that an Anglo woman won this majority-minority district? No, it was quiet. Where was the outrage and the cries of racism? Or am I not minority enough simply because I'm a Republican? No, there was never any outrage after the results of my first campaign. And guess what? There shouldn't have been. My majority-minority district decided to elect an Anglo for the first time in over 60 years, based off the promises she made in her campaign. She won fair and square. But then she came here to Austin and voted her own values that did not match our South Texas values. And I had the opportunity to expose that during our rematch. Only in 2024, during that presidential cycle, I was up against even greater odds. The data indicated that I should have lost by at least 6 percentage points against an incumbent with unlimited resources. But yet, instead, I won and became the first Republican to hold Senate District 27 since Reconstruction. I didn't win by ignoring voters. I won by listening to them, by asking them what they believe, what they value, and what kind of Texas they want for their families. And the response was absolutely clear. You see, people in South Texas and across the state want strong families, safe communities, low taxes, secure borders, and the right to live their lives without government overreach. We do not support men and women's sports. We do not support abortion on demand. We do not support tax hikes. We do not support open borders. These are not just talking points. These are the words and values of the people that I represent in South Texas. And therein lies the truth, members. The other party lost us Hispanic voters. They lost us when they shut down our churches during COVID. They lost us when they dismissed faith, family, and the sanctity of life. They lost us when they stopped listening to the very people that they claim to represent. And they keep losing us more and more and more, especially in South Texas. This is not a racial shift. This is a values shift. And no amount of shouting racism is going to change that. The people of South Texas have spoken, and Washington, D.C. now needs to start listening. We have all seen the political shift in South Texas over the past several years. It came to a head this last election. I won my seat. President Trump won counties all along the southern border that had not voted Republican in generations, if ever. President Trump won with 55% of the Latino vote and doubled his support among black voters from where it was in 2020. So let's stop pretending that this is all about race. It is about values. It is about representation, real representation. The fact that we're redrawing the maps is to ensure that as these shifts have happened and continue to happen, that the people are able to have representation that reflects their values, not their last name, not their skin color. These maps give Texans a voice that reflects their values, not outdated assumptions about race or party. That is why I support them. Because our job is to ensure that the people of Texas, their voices, their families, and their priorities are represented at our nation's capital. So if you're worried about losing minority votes in this next election, stop blaming maps and start looking in the mirror. Stop judging people by the color of their skin and start focusing on the content of their character. And with that, members, I proudly stand and look forward to casting my vote in favor of House Bill 4. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, members.
Thank you, Senator Hinojosa. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I wasn't actually going to give any closing remarks, but there's been so many things expressed alleging or suggesting why I'm carrying this bill. And so I wanted to make it very clear why I support this map. The Biden years were devastating to the United States. But since we've had a Republican majority in the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate, and since we've had a Republican president, we have seen remarkable changes in America. We now have a secure border. We're seeing an incredible slowdown in the flow of deadly fentanyl. We've seen a continuation of historic tax cuts that were about to expire. We're seeing an incredible reset of world trade policy, all in favor of America. Our military, it's back in the business of national security, not social experiments. We're standing up to Iran. We're standing up to China. We're standing up to Russia. We may even soon see an end to the Russo-Ukrainian war, which has taken uncounted lives. We're seeing an end to the foolishness of men and boys in women and little girls' sports. We're fighting anti-Semitism on our college campuses, which grew so ugly and so rampant. We're seeing the deportation of Venezuelan gangs and dangerous cartel members, which had come in. I will tell you, I was a cop in 1980 during the Cuban boat lift, and Castro opened the prison doors to what we estimated was about 10,000 hardcore criminals. They were murderers, they were rapists, they were drug dealers. They spread out across the United States. I dealt with some of them in Fort Worth. It took the law enforcement community across this country years to work through those people and get them in jail and away from the citizens. During the Biden years, there were hundreds of thousands of hardcore criminal gang members, criminal gang members, hardcore criminals that came into the United States. I'm telling you, our grandchildren will still be seeing the effects of those hundreds of thousands that came into America. I could go on, but I just want to say that this map, from my perspective, it has nothing to do with race. It's been repeatedly said that it's about race, that it's racist. It has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with good policy. Because this historic process, the amazing progress that's been made in just 8 months, all of this will end if the Republicans lose the Congress. And it's become incredibly apparent to us in recent months the amount of gerrymandering that has been done in blue states. And I'm convinced that if Texas does not take this action, that there is an extreme risk that that Republican majority will be lost. And if it does, the next 2 years after the midterms, they will be nothing but inquisitions and impeachments and humiliation for our country. That's what we saw during the Biden years, and that's what will happen again if the Republicans lose the majority in Congress. And that's why this map is needed. Now, as to the map itself, just a couple of quick comments. I adopted HB 4, which I have said repeatedly was not drawn by me, but I adopted it because it accomplished my 3 goals. Those 3 goals were that it be legal, that it improve the political performance for those seeking Congress as Republican candidates, and that it improve compactness. This map clearly meets all 3 goals. A lot of questions today were asked about the use of racial data. It is my understanding that race was not used in the drawing of this map. And I can say unequivocally that it was not used in my consideration of HB 4, not used to any degree. Now, I think it's important to note that despite all the criticism of this map, no alternate or substitute maps have been offered by a Democrat as an amendment. Let me repeat that. Despite all the criticism today of this map, there was not a single floor substitute offered by the Democrats, nor was there a single amendment offered. Additionally, throughout all the hearings, no one presented an analysis of data to demonstrate that this map violates any law, not one. Throughout all the hearings, House and Senate for that matter, no one presented an analysis of data to demonstrate that this map violates any law. We heard hours and hours of testimony, and we were not presented with any racially polarized voting analysis, Jingles factor analysis, or political cohesion analysis that suggested in any way that this map was in violation of the Voting Rights Act. Why not? It's because this map is legal as to all applicable law. This map is about policy. It's about continuing good policy. It's about overcoming gerrymandering in other states. And I think it is self-evident that because no analysis has been presented through any hearing or on this floor today, no data has been presented to show that it is not legal, I think it is self-evident that this map is legal in all respects. Now, with that said, just on a personal note, I do truly want to thank all the members that have served on the redistricting committee. It came upon us all pretty quick, and it's taken a lot of work and a lot of time, and it's been very difficult. And in fact, it's even sadly strained some long-time friendships. But I want to thank Vice Chair Creighton, Senator Hinojosa, Miles, Hughes, Alvarado, Paxton, Sparks, and Parker. Thank you for your time on this committee. And Mr. President, with that, I again will move final passage.
Members, we're going to take a break, a dinner break. Our staff has been up here since 10 o'clock this morning. We'll recess until 11:30. Senator Parker.
Mr. President, make a motion to recess officially till 11:30 this evening.
Any objection? Hearing none. We stand in recess till 11:30. If you want to vote on the motion, the secretary can call the roll. The ladies have been here for almost 11 hours. They're going to get a break. When we come back, I understand there is a plan for a filibuster. And if that's the case, the senator will be recognized for breaking, for a dinner break that they deserve, period. Senator, you have not been recognized. Sorry. If you want to object, we'll call the roll. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez, Hagenbu, Hall, Hinojosa of Hidalgo, Nueces, Hinojosa, Nueces, Huffman, Hughes, Johnson, King, Colcourse, Menendez, Middleton, Miles, Nichols, Parker, Perry, Schwertner, Sparks, West, Zaffarini.
There being 18 ayes and 11 nays, the motion is adopted. Senate stands in recess till 11:30.